August truly did sip away, but not so much like a bottle of wine, more so like 72 iced coffees. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife, and today I am taking you through my reading wrap up for the month of August. I had a slightly less successful month than I think that I was planning to. I was one of the co-hosts for Team Lit Pong Champs for Pig Pongathon, which was run by Krystal from Bomb Book Reviews. I love taking part in this readathon. I think this is my third year as the host for it. And I had such a great time with the team, and we all had such a great reading month, but things just didn't go our way this time. I think some of that from my contribution was that August was such a busy month for me in terms of my day job, in terms of socializing and places that I had to be and people that I needed to see and be with. So there just wasn't as much time for reading as I had hoped that there would be when I put everything together. In terms of the stats, I read 8 books across the month of August and I DNF'd a further 3. Of those, a couple of those were actually not for nows, which is a separate category that I have. Of the 8 books that I did read, 7 of them were intended for an adult audience, whereas one of them was written with children in mind. 2 of the books that I read were physical, 2 of them were ebooks, and the other 4 were audiobooks. That all accumulated to 1,097 pages read across the month and 41 hours listened to. In terms of the genres, I read 1 contemporary book, 1 nonfiction book, 1 thriller book, and 5 romance books. August was surprisingly the first month of the entire year where I had read a thriller at all. Usually they kind of pepper themselves throughout the year, but I don't know how I managed to get almost 9 months into the year without picking up a thriller even once. As for the star ratings, 2 books got a 4.5-star rating, another 2 got a 4-star rating, 2 books got a 3.5-star rating, 1 book got a 2.5-star rating, and the non-fiction book, as usual, didn't get any star rating at all. As usual, I'm going to start with the DNFs and the not for nows, and the first book is actually a not for now. This is how I categorize my soft DNFs. It's a book that I have put down for now, but I am going to come back to it at some time in the future. Either I just wasn't in the right headspace, I didn't have the time to read it, I wanted to get myself more immersed into the story, but I know it's something that's going to work for me. And that is definitely true of Us Against You by Frederick Backman. This is the second book in the Beartown trilogy, and you are following the residents of the small town of Beartown, following everything that has happened in the first book and the disbandment of the hockey's team towards the end of the first book. They're now in the process of setting up a brand new hockey team with new management, new players, new coaches, everything that is needed. And they are going to go head to head with some of the former players from their own hockey team in a kind of David versus Goliath style battle. I know that this book is going to work for me, and I know that because the writing in there was absolutely stunning. I just wasn't in the right headspace for it. I needed to be colder. For some reason, these books just scream out cold weather and winter and blankets and chill to me. I think it's because it's set in northern Sweden, it's set in a snowy town, it is set among a hockey rink, and I just need to be in that vibe when I'm reading these books. It was the exact same story with Beartown. I think I just need to be atmospherically wintertime. Because I found it really difficult to get on board with the story and to connect with it when I was reading it in the 28 to 30 degrees Celsius weather that we were having across August. So I just need to give this another time. I need to give it a little bit of a break. Maybe I'll come back to it in like November, December, January kind of time when the weather is definitely going to be nowhere near a 28 to 30 degrees. Maybe like a 28 to 30 Fahrenheit. And I'll just revisit it then. Another not for now that again I know I'm going to love is The Bullet That Missed by Richard Osman. This is the 3rd book in the Thursday Murder Club series, and this has come to me so highly recommended. Brittany from Brittany Loves Reading said that this was one of the ones that she really enjoyed throughout the series. It was definitely an upswing from The Man Who Died Twice, which both of us I think had actually read around the same time completely by coincidence. My brother and my dad have also read this one and they both really enjoyed it, and I know that they have got the 4th copy already read. So I need to read this one so that I can catch up with the family group chat. But again, this just didn't sit with me for some reason across August. I think I just need to be a little bit more atmospheric as well. It needs to be that kind of October chill in the air, the kind of spooky season vibes. When I'm seeing actual spooky things in a shop, I think that's when I'll be in the right frame of mind to start reading this. I did get a good part into the audiobook, and it's narrated by Fiona Shaw, whose voice I really enjoyed narrating this. But I think maybe I need to go into it as a physical book. I think I maybe need to leave thrillers aside as an audiobook. When I'm getting really engrossed in a thriller, it's because I can see what's happening and it's because I can visualize it myself. But I don't have that with an audiobook. Sometimes I can't process it as quickly, even though I am listening to it at a speed that I'm comfortable with. I just can't picture it in my head as well as I can with a physical book. So I think that this is going to work fine for a non-fiction book. It's going to work fine for a romance or a contemporary book. But for a thriller, I think I need to have the physical book in front of me as a written copy, either as a physical book or as an ebook. But I need to have that kind of anchor in front of me. On then to the actual DNF, and that was Emma Disappeared by Andrew Hughes. I had really high hopes going into this one. I had read a couple of Goodreads reviews about it. It had a pretty high Goodreads rating. So I went into it with pretty high expectations that just weren't met. This is about James, who has been struck by the disappearance of Emma Hart. She is also a resident of Dublin. She went to Trinity College, and they have a very small random connection in that one of Emma's friends, Libby, is met on the bus by James one day, and the two of them strike up a conversation and start a relationship together. There turn out to be a couple of things about Emma's disappearance that don't quite add up. There are a couple of people who you might think have been involved with this that don't have any involvement at all. And Emma's boyfriend Tom has not been heard of since the night that she disappeared. Everybody is starting to talk about women's safety on the streets in Dublin at night. Everyone is starting to talk about what kind of things go on behind closed doors. Was Tom responsible for Emma's disappearance? There was just nothing really about this book that grabbed me though. For a thriller book, we didn't really get a whole lot of time getting to the bottom of this mystery. I felt that we were more so concentrating on James and Libby's new and founding relationship and them getting to know each other a little bit better and them spending some more time together. It didn't really feel to me like we were getting anywhere towards finding out why Emma had disappeared and where she was and what reasons it was that she had disappeared in the first place. Another pretty big problem that I have with this book is how out of age range the characters are actually written. James is written down as 24 years old, so canonically he's 24, the same age as Emma Hart was when she disappeared, but he actually acts and is written like somebody who is about 10 or so years older than that. I found it a little hard to believe that somebody who's 24, as in barely a year or so out of college, has already found himself in a team lead position with quite a lot of responsibility, with a team that he is looking after. It just didn't feel very natural. I know how the world of work goes, and you don't just walk into that level of responsibility. You really have to work your way up. There was also a really weird situation with his older brother. James's elder brother is about 12 years or so older than James is, but he also has a 17-year-old child and has been married for about 3 years before that. Now, that puts my calculations that his older brother had been married since he was about 14 or 15 years old. That isn't legal in Ireland. You cannot be married with a child at the age of 14 years old. I plod along with it, and to be honest, I was pretty much hate reading it until I got to about 70 or so percent of the way through. James and one of his friends were going to a radio station to have a discussion about Emma's disappearance and about the impact that that had had on women and how safe they feel on the streets of Dublin. The show's producer basically says, "It looks really bad for us if we have a panel of just 3 men. Is there any chance that any of you is non-binary?" And all 3 of the guys look around each other, and James's friend just basically puts his hand up and says, "I mean, I can pretend to be non-binary." It'd be kind of a laugh, wouldn't it? That's when I put this book down. That kind of prejudice and that kind of bigotry, even if you are just joking around, is not something that I think has any place in a book. And that is the exact moment that I said, I am not going any further with this book. It might have really improved for me after that point, but I am never going to go and figure out why. Let's improve the vibe a little bit and talk about the books that I did read across the month of August. And the first book that I finished across August was The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. This book follows Anna and West, who got married when they were in college, basically as a marriage of convenience. Housing costs are incredibly expensive in the city that they went to college, and Anna needed somewhere to live, and West needed somebody to marry so that he could access his trust fund from his family. His family are the owners of a massive supermarket chain the whole way across the United States, and it is stipulated that once you have gotten married and you have proven that you've been married for over 5 years, you are entitled to all of your trust fund. So the 2 of them enter into a marriage of convenience basically to get exactly what they need out of it. And then they just never get divorced. 5 years or so later, Anna is working as a struggling artist in Los Angeles, whereas West is living out in New York. And his sister is just about to get married, but he has been given an invite not just for himself, but also for his wife, Anna. Family have never met her, and they think that this might be the perfect time to get everybody acquainted with one another. West is then tasked with getting in touch with his actual wife and inviting her to a family wedding where she knows absolutely nobody. They really have to give the pretense that they have been living in happy marriage for about 5 years, know everything that there is to know about one another. So they're giving crash courses on their way to Indonesia. They are putting PowerPoints together about the important things that you need to know about one another. And Anna is basically in this for the long haul, because at the end of it, she is going to access some of West's trust fund, and she's going to walk home with a 6-figure sum as a massive thank you for the huge work that she's been doing for the week. Of course, when Anna and West are back together and they are spending a lot more time together, they start to actually fall for one another, and they start to get to know each other a lot more than they ever had when they were living together. I really enjoyed this kind of mashup of a fake dating and a marriage convenience. Those are two of my favorite romance tropes, so I was really hopeful that this would work out for me, and I am so glad that this did. This felt very much like a vintage Christina Lauren book. If you loved The Unhoneymooners by the same authors, you are really going to enjoy this one, because it has quite a lot of the same hijinks. It has a really nice beach and exotic setting in that it is set in Indonesia. It has a really big family drama situation to it, and it has the fake dating trope that The Unhoneymooners is famous for. I said that there was a lot of family drama in this book, and I was not exaggerating about that. West's family are some of the worst people I have ever read about. In particular, his dad is one character who I never particularly liked sharing a lot of time with. You can tell that West's father is the kind of person who has never really been told no across his whole life. He's been getting away with quite a lot of things that he really shouldn't be getting away with. He's been doing things just mainly because he wants to, not with any thought about the consequences or the things that are going to come out of that. Something, however, that I did enjoy about this book is how willing Anna is to get on board with all of this. She goes and does independent research into the members of West's family and finds out a little bit more about her sister-in-law, for example. She finds out a lot about the background of her family members, and I really enjoyed watching her just actually get stuck in with all of the events that were happening in the lead up to the wedding. Whether they were going out for a big hike together or whether they were going swimming and snorkeling together, I thought it was really interesting to see her actually get involved and sort of surprising West with how willing she was to get on board with everything. I also really liked the treatment that Reagan, West's oldest niece, got in this book. I connected quite a lot with Reagan as we had a quite similar situation in school. We were both kind of outsiders. We were both being very much looked down upon by other people in the school. And I think that Anna and Reagan had a really nice connection in this book that I thought was so well written and so cherished. It was really good to see Anna having such a great and positive influence on this young girl, and I really hope that we get to see that expanded a little bit more, maybe in another book in the future. Like I said, this feels like vintage Christina Lauren. I had kind of dips and flows with them for the last while or so. I didn't really love Something Wilder, mainly because it has a second chance romance situation in there, but I really loved the Soulmate Equation and the True Love Experiment, so I was hoping that I would be 3 for 3 with my most recent Christina Lauren reads, and I am so glad that I was. Then I read a children's non-fiction book called Girls Play 2 by Jackie Hurley. This is the first in a series, and I would really love to read the second book, but it just wasn't available through my library app for the entire month of August. So as soon as I see it available now, I am definitely going to jump on it, but I just never got around to it in August. This is written by Jackie Hurley, who is a broadcaster with RTE, the national broadcaster in Ireland, and she is a sports presenter and a sports reporter. She noticed that when she was trying to get her 2 young children involved in sport and to inspire a love of sports in them, there weren't a whole lot of places that she could look for inspiration for her young daughter, who she would really like to inspire a love of sport in. So Jackie thought to herself, well, if I want to read a book, maybe I've got to write it. This book is a little fact file on some of Ireland's most successful and most well-known female athletes. And something that I really love about this is that it's not just people that you would have known a lot about, such as Katie Taylor, who is one of Ireland's most successful female boxers, and also Kelly Harrington, who is another successful female boxer, Annalise Murphy, who won a silver medal in sailing in the Rio Olympics in 2016. But there are also athletes who are very much more known in Ireland, such as Cora Staunton, who is one of our biggest Gaelic football players, and who also went down to Australia to continue her career in Aussie rules. And there's also Breach Corkery, who's one of Ireland's most successful camogie players. I really loved this book. I think it's such a great thing for young girls to have these days, that they can flick through the pages of these books and see people who are going to the heights that you can reach in these sports, and it will really inspire them to pick up a hurley or to go out and learn to swim or to learn to horse ride. I think it's such a fantastic thing to have, and I definitely think it needs to be in the school libraries of every single school across the entire country. Then I read A Girl Like Her by Talia Hibbert. This is one that was recommended to me by Brie from Four Paws in a Book, and I think she has now told me to read this about 25,000 times. So I said, you know what, August's buzzword is like, let's give it a go then. I'm really glad that I got to this one because it stuck with me so well. I absolutely sped through this in about 2 days and I could not put it down. This book is about Ruth, who very much marches to the beat of her own drum. She doesn't particularly care what the other people in town have been saying about her for months, in that she is completely promiscuous, that she is a slut, that she's been through the entire list of guys who live in the town, and now she's just out for more. She's looking for her next conquest. This is when she meets with Evan, who has moved into an apartment 2 doors down from her. They've met each other in the hallway a couple of times, and they've exchanged pleasantries, but there's never really been anything more than that. Evan has been warned away by Daniel, who is his boss, who has a history with Ruth and who has basically told Evan that if he knows what's best for himself, he is going to give Ruth the widest berth that he can. However, Evan really starts to get to know Ruth over a couple of days, and they really start to form a great connection with one another, and the chemistry between the two of them is absolutely sparkling. Their banter is fantastic. You can tell that they really like and respect one another, not just in a romantic way, but also platonically as people. I also love how understanding Evan is of the things that make Ruth what she is. Ruth is autistic and she needs a little bit more time to come to terms with what the world is. She has a very set and structured routine. She knows what she likes to wear. She knows what she likes to eat. And this is when Evan turned into one of my favorite people of all time. I need the kind of neighbor who is going to turn up at my doorstep every 3 or 4 days with a massive steaming plate of lasagna in their hands, hand me the pan, and just go back about their day. Then they come back 3 days later, collect the pan that I have emptied and washed, and then they bring me another one. That's the kind of neighbor that I need in my life. Another relationship that I really loved across this book is the one between Ruth and her older sister Hannah. She has got a kind of tumultuous relationship with her mother, but you can definitely see that Ruth and Hannah are each other's ride or die. There is a specific point of the book where this is brought screamingly into light, and I'm not going to go into the whys, and I'm not going to go into the how that happens, but it is to do with something that has happened in Ruth and Hannah and Daniel's life about 2 or so years before the beginning of this book. And you find out a little bit more about Daniel and who he is as a person and why it is that he is so adamant that Evan needs to stay away from Ruth. When all of this starts to come to light and when you realize what kind of people that you're dealing with here, I was truly sucked into this book. There was absolutely no way that I could put it down after that. I also truly loved how slow burn the relationship between Ruth and Evan is. It isn't that they just see each other and then straight away they're jumping on top of one another. They really take the time to get to know one another, to get to know each other's quirks, to spend time just sitting on the couch watching TV. And there is, of course, the, oh, I touched his hand and I didn't really mean to, but I don't want to move my hand away. I really loved that kind of thought process that the two of them had against each other. And then when the smut starts to come in, it never feels gratuitous because it's been slowly building up to that. And that is something that I really love about books. I really love when you just see things start to bubble and then boil over and then you reach breaking point. Something else that I loved about the steamy scenes in this book is how important consent was for these people. There is so many ways that you can make consent sexy. You don't necessarily have to say, can I touch you here? There's ways that you can say it and there's ways that you can go about it, and Talia knows exactly how to write a smutty scene. I have read quite a lot of her traditionally published books, and I would say that her independent pubs are much, much steamier than the traditionally published ones. So if you're looking for something that has the exact same humor, the exact same banter of the Brown Sister trilogy, but you want the spice level just notched up a tiny bit, these are definitely the books that you need to go for. One thing that I found maybe a little bit unrealistic about this book is that when Daniel's father finds out the things that have been happening in the past and what kind of man his son has become, he's much too quick to admit that, and he's much too quick to kind of take that on board. I really thought that there would be a lot more pushback against this. I really thought that he would be a bit more boys will be boys about the situation, but I was kind of pleasantly surprised to see that he wasn't as on board with it as I thought that he would be. A Girl Like Her is the first in a trilogy. I think it's called the Ravenswood trilogy, and I am definitely going to go and have a look for the other two books in it. Much like with Girls Play 2, I couldn't find any library copies of the second two books in the series, but as soon as they become available to me, they are going straight onto my TBR. Then we go on to my most disappointing book of the entire year so far. I don't know who it was that wrote a novel love story, but it definitely wasn't Ashley Poston, despite her name being on the front cover. This didn't feel anything like The 7-Year Slip or The Dead Romantics. It felt like a completely different person had written the book. This is following Eileen, or Elsie, who is on her way to a book convention for a weekend away where she basically needs to just reset from the world. She's had a pretty rough and tumultuous time in her personal life recently, and she's hoping that being around her bookish friends, even though she has to go by herself because her best friend is going on Iceland and she's pretty sure she's going to come back with an engagement ring. She's hoping that this is going to bring her around a little bit. However, her car breaks down outside of a very small town in New York, and she discovers that she is in Eloroton. This town is the setting for Elsie's favourite book series, which is sadly going to lie unfinished as the author passed away while in the middle of writing the fifth and final book. Elsie is astounded to be walking through the streets of the town and seeing all of the shops and the bakeries and the cafes and the people that she had known and she had read, and having this all play out in front of her eyes. She discovers that everything is basically happening in the ways that the book had done, and once they get to the end of the books, they will start all over again. There's only one person in this town who isn't aware that they are part of a book story, and that is Anders. He is the only person who is outside of everything and who isn't really affected by the magic that is keeping Elsie here too. As she gets to know Anders a little bit more and as they start to spend a little bit more time together, not only does she start to really fall for him, but she also finds out the reasons why this magic hasn't been affecting him as much as it has everyone else in the town. I did not quite get on board with the reasoning why. I felt like it was a little bit of a cop-out, and I felt like it was a little bit too obvious that that would be the reasoning why. I also didn't necessarily agree with the third act breakup, and this is definitely one where I think Elsie and Anders should have stayed broken up after it. When this is something that someone has done to you in a previous relationship and that you have walked away from that because of, why are you then accepting it in a totally different situation with a totally different person, even when it is just the exact same thing happening to you again? It's kind of a once bitten, twice shy situation. Or if you want to be really harsh about it, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. However, this book also just wasn't really well written. It wasn't written with any of the magic that I had found in The 7-Year Slip and in The Dead Romantics. If I read one more bloody time that Anders had mint green eyes and blonde hair, I was going to throw myself off the top of the TV tower in Berlin. It was so repetitive that it just felt like Ashley Poston was trying to reach word count. It almost got to a stage where it was every second page and mentioned at least twice on the one page. I don't know what happened in the writing or the editing section of this book, but it definitely needed to be looked over, and there definitely needed to be some things that needed to be taken out because of how repetitive it was getting. The book also features quite a lot of time jumps, and I didn't particularly feel that they were well written and they were well presented. You are just dragged straight back into a situation about 5 years before the book is taking place. Then you are brought screaming back to the present, and there's no real distinction between when this is happening and when this is happening. I think it just needed to be labelled a little bit clearer or written out a little bit better. For me, that way just didn't work. I was also really hopeful about reading about readers and reading about a book series But this one just didn't work for me here. There was way too much importance placed on that book series and on the characters and on things that had happened in previous books and why that was so important to what was happening now. But I'm never going to get to read these books. They are completely fictional. They exist only in the world of a novel love story. So I have a difficult time of getting to grips with this and with connecting to it because it's a piece of media that I'm never going to be able to experience. I also felt it a little weird that when we're talking about a book series that is really spicy and that Elsie can barely read it in public, the one sex scene that we had in this book was Fade to Black. I felt like that was such an imbalance that it just didn't work anymore. This is not going to put me off Ashley Poston's books. I have had a really great time with her up until now. I'm hoping that this is just a dip. This is just like an off day in the office for her, and that the next time that we see each other again with a totally different book, that's going to be a much better situation. Then I read The Layover by Lacey Walden, and if you're looking for an escape this summer, if you're looking for something that's gonna bring you to a tropical paradise, this is definitely the way to go. This book is set in Belize, which is a country I have never been to. It's in Central America, which is quite far away from me, but I had a pretty good time with this book. It's about Ava, who is coming up on her 10th anniversary as a flight attendant, and she is just about to board her last flight as a flight attendant. She has just gotten engaged to her boyfriend Alexander, and the stipulation was that she is going to stop working as an air stewardess, and instead she is going to concentrate on a new job on the ground. This isn't something that you can see Ava is completely okay with, but she feels like just to keep the peace, she is going to hand in her notice and this is going to be her final flight. They take off, and with a layover in Portland in Oregon, they then head on to Belize and spend so much time on the beach because their flight has been pushed back for 3 days. There is a huge storm in the country and a huge storm around Central America, so no flights are going to be able to leave the country, no ships are going to be able to dock, and everything is basically shut down. The problem is that on this flight is Jack, who is another member of cabin crew with the same airline, and he and Ava have always butted heads. She had an instant dislike to him basically from the moment that they meet. I wasn't quite sure why that was when we first went into this book because there was so much animosity basically only on her side. You never really see Jack have any problems with Ava. He's completely pleasant to her. He's more than cordial to her. And as you go further onto this book, you start to realize what it is that Ava has against him. I really didn't think that Jack was the bad guy here. I really thought that there was somebody else to whom all of this anger should have been directed. And I really think that there should have been a little bit better peace talks between Ava and Jack throughout this book. There is quite a lot of good banter and there is quite a lot of good chemistry between the two, but I did feel like that was a little bit clouded just by how much Ava hated Jack for what felt to me no reason at all. I felt that this book gave a really realistic account of what it is like to be cabin crew. Lacey Walden either used to be or still currently works as cabin crew, so you do get a kind of a first-hand account of what it's like. You do get to find out how stressful the job can be, how long the hours are, how much you are away from home, and the pressures that are on you when you are actually in the air. While you're cabin crew, you're not just a waiter and you're not just bringing people water and drinks. You are actually responsible for the safety of every single person on board, particularly if you are the purser, who is the senior cabin crew member on planes. I felt like this was written so well. You can actually see the kind of camaraderie that people will have if they've been on flights together a couple of times and if they've worked together off and on. You really start to see relationships build throughout everybody in this book. There are a couple of people who are new into Ava's life here, but she really integrates with them so well that you almost get the feeling of, I am sad that this is going to be your last flight because I would have loved to see you develop these relationships more. As much as I enjoyed reading about Ava and Jack's relationship developing, and as much as I enjoyed reading about the life of cabin crew, I hated reading about Alexander, who was Ava's fiance at the start of this book. He is such an awful character. He is controlling, he is narcissistic, he is manipulative, he keeps moving the goalposts back from their relationship and from their wedding. Ava wanted something small, sort of like a courthouse ceremony and then dinner with a restaurant with some family and close friends. Alexander got his parents involved, who have massive amounts of money and trust funds coming out of their arses, and then turned it into a 4.5 day extravaganza with millions of dollars being spent. and totally different times of the year being brought into question, and guests that Ava has never heard of, and places that she knows she doesn't want to get married in. I was actually really glad when, towards the end of the book, Alexander tries to come back and win favour with Ava once again, and she basically dismisses him instantly. I was so glad that she had gotten to a stage of her relationship with herself where she knew she was comfortable with doing this, she knew who she was much more confident in herself, and I just really enjoy seeing a man getting his arse handed to him. One thing that I did kind of raise an eyebrow about this book is the height requirements for cabin crew. It is generally accepted that if you are cabin crew, you need to be of a certain minimum height and a certain maximum height. This is because you need to be able to reach into the overhead bins and open or close them if anything has gone wrong. Ava in this book is written as quite a short character, and she's not able to reach the overhead bins of some of the newer planes that are brought in for the airline. I felt like this was a little bit of a questionable thing. There are certain standards that you have to adhere to if you are cabin crew. You have to be able to do that reach test, and if you're not able to reach those heights, even if standing on tiptoes, you might be dismissed. I thought that this was just a little bit unnatural, and it did take me out of the book just a little bit. Then I read Mixed Signals by B.K. Barson. This is the third in the Inglewise series, and I absolutely loved being back among this small town and getting to know the characters from other books a little bit better. This one is focused on Layla, who is the town baker and has had a slew of super bad dates recently. She is saved one night by Caleb, who has been a good friend of hers for years, but she's never really seen him in that light. He's always just been her friend who's around town, but now she's actually starting to notice how good looking he is. Caleb and Layla decide to fake date one another to help each other out. Caleb is also kind of going through a bad spell recently and doesn't know what he has been doing wrong on dates, so Layla is going to give him a couple of pointers, whereas he is going to show her what an actual good date should be and how a true gentleman is supposed to act on these dates. This is something that I really enjoyed about this book. I felt like the reason that they were fake dating one another is one that would realistically work in real life. It is one that didn't seem far-fetched, it didn't seem like it was super convoluted, it was just two friends who were helping each other out. Naturally, with every fake dating book that you read, these guys don't stay fake dating one another for long, and I truly loved watching some of their dates together. I loved watching them suffer through going through an ice rink and falling over on top of one another time and time again. I absolutely loved watching their connection grow. You really see them growing from, oh, I kind of like him, but he's just a friend, to I genuinely think that I want to be with him forever. Caleb has been in love with Layla ever since he first met her, and he goes to her bakery 3 times a week to order exactly the same thing, a coffee and a croissant for breakfast, and then heads out on his way. I really loved this kind of routine and keeping on touch with one another and checking in on one another. And it's so nice to have that little usual place that you go to and the usual order that you have that is basically sitting on the counter waiting for you even before you've come in. The small town vibes in this book are truly immaculate. You really see everybody coming together, helping each other out, being there for one another, especially in a moment where Layla is preparing for a magazine interview which is going to focus on her bakery, and things start to really go wrong at the 11th hour. Caleb really starts to rally the whole town around her, start baking everything that they can, getting ingredients together, going to the grocery store to pick up anything that is needed. And I absolutely love that small town spirit. Having grown up in such a small community myself, it's something that I am also super innately familiar with, and it was really great to see that on the pages of the book too. I also really liked how important family was in this book. Caleb comes from quite a big family. His grandmother is of Hispanic descent and she speaks Spanish mainly when she's at home. And she has a lot of interactions with her children and her grandchildren in Spanish. I may not be a Spanish speaker, but I really love seeing these other languages in books. It connects me more to the character because they are celebrating their own heritage and where they actually come from. As an immigrant myself, it's super important to me to have those experiences and to see people who have left their own country and going to another place to set up and to live their lives and to find work, to embrace their own culture and to embrace their own heritage and keep those parts of their identity alive is so important to me. This book was a hell of a lot spicier than I expected it to be, and there is so much sexual tension even with nothing happening. It all starts to build up slowly and slowly, time and time. But I didn't expect there to be as many fireworks in this book as there was. Because Love Like Farms was pretty spicy, but I wouldn't have said it was in anywhere near this level. And then In the Weeds was also pretty good on the spice level as well, but this just kicked it up a notch. So I am expecting that Business Casual, the fourth book in this series, is going to be way up there, and I cannot wait to get reading it. Those are the books that I read in August that I can tell you about now, because some of them are going to be featuring in upcoming videos and I don't want to give you too much of a spoiler. What is the best book that you read in August, or what book are you most looking forward to for September? If you would love to leave me a comment but you can't think of anything you'd like to say, then just leave me the sunshine emoji, because August was a lot sunnier than I was expecting it to be. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.